All right, so this is our week 2 live lecture. How I do things is I'm going to, well, here, hold on. Let me see. Let me ask y'all if you would type in the chat box who your teacher is, just so you know, if your teacher is Marie, you are still in the right place. Okay, Christopher. So I think you know this. I think you were in my week 1 lecture. But if you're like, who is this? My name's Emily Green, and I'm an instructor here at Full Sail. So if I'm your teacher, you're in the right place too. And if Marie's your teacher, you're still in the right place. She and I like to team teach sometimes, and this month we're doing that. So I get week 1 and week 2, and she's going to do week 3 and week 4. All right, so moving on. Here's our agenda for the day. Today, I want to go over just very briefly our assignment due dates, and then we're going to get to the week's material. We're going to be talking about a lot of things I love to nerd out on. So if I go down a rabbit hole, I'm going to let the attendants today, y'all just rope me in and say, let's move on. So I can really nerd out on a lot of these because I find them really interesting as a psychology instructor, and I'm a psychotherapist where I do EMDR therapy with people, which is a great modality that helps people with all the big traumas and little traumas of their life. This is the stuff I love, and I find it just very relevant today too. So the week's material for week 2, we're going to go over a brief history of the field of psychology. It's going to take us up to the present day, and really get a kind of a bigger view of positive psychology. If any of you tend to be like me and you might have maybe have a little more cynicism and you might upchuck a little bit when you hear positive psychology, this is, I want to show you the bigger meaning of it and the other side of it, where it's not about just faking it till you make it. It's not about rose-colored glasses. It really is more what I like to think of positive psychology as growth psychology. So we're going to get into that. I'm going to introduce you to some key players. And it's really neat because these guys are still alive, and a lot of what we're going to talk about are about people way in the past, even though it's real relevant. These people are very, oops, I'm sorry. This took me out. Here we are. Yes, that freaked me out too, Christopher. So we're back. Okay, that was odd. Sorry about that. And then we're going to get into the theories, and the main theories this week are we're going to get into Martin Seligman's PERMA, and then also Dr. C, because I mess up his name all the time, his flow theory. And then what I really want us to, if not weave into today, but at least tack on at the end, is really what I find so relevant about this week's material is it's a great way of pushing back against the stigma that we have around mental illness, and even giving ourselves the space to really get into mental health. So that's what we're going to be doing today. And I want to show y'all real quick just the class. So did any of you have any questions about due dates and things like that? Because I just wanted to go over that really quick. And if any of you have questions, just type them in the chat box, but I'm going to give a little overview. So everyone who's still getting, Christopher, I'm glad you find it easy. But for any of y'all who kind of felt like week 1 got away from you, this is just a really helpful reminder. I'm not going to go into the assignment details, but I just really want to reiterate a couple of things. One, today, you have, since it's Tuesday, by the end of the night tonight, you have 2.2 call to play due. Now, I forgot to mention last time, and I apologize because I know some of my students kind of went into panic mode when they saw that this activity is a test. It's not a test. That test is just for a technical label that I have to and Marie has to use just to be able to have it display the way we want to. So the call to play, it's due today. It is not a test. It is a series of reflection questions that really helps you get in the mindset of what the course applications are going to be for the week. You do not have to have already completed your reading, so I really do apologize if that was not made clear. So deep breath, just know today, by the end of the day, you need to go in there and complete that activity. The other due date is your discussion post. The first part of that is due by the end of Thursday. And then the second part is due Sunday, and that's the required response post. So 3 due dates to remember is that you have your call to play due tonight, and then on Thursday you have your initial discussion post, and Sunday you have the response post due, and there too. Okay, so I'm gonna hop back in here. Alrighty. So we're gonna be looking at the difference or the verses between traditional and positive psychology. So the overview of traditional psychology is it's a more limited version, and I do want to just make a quick little caveat. There is nothing wrong with traditional psychology. It has provided us a lot of good things, a lot of helpful modalities that serve people very well, and that portion is usually those who are suffering from, severe mental illnesses. And traditional psychology, it has a place. What I like to think of positive psychology, what it does is it rounds it out. Because in traditional psychology, it was really limited to the disease or medical model, and it focused on dysfunction. So the people that it served was only a small portion of the population, and it really left out from providing any kind of aid or service to those of us who are not suffering with a mental illness. Positive psychology, on the flip side, it is a field that explores how ordinary people can become happier and more fulfilled. Now, again, this is just me. When I see a word like happier, I immediately kind of cringe a little bit because I do believe that today in our pop culture, there is this obsession with quote unquote positivity. Now, that's nothing wrong. However, I do find what makes me cringe, at least, is the superficial, if we only leave it at the superficial, or especially as I see a lot of it, how that show up on social media and things like that, that happy look or that perception of happy or the putting out the image of being happy. What I'm really hoping that you can all walk away with is the richness of positive psychology and just how robust it is. So it's not, again, just happy. I also like to replace happy with maybe a more fitting word, might be more conscious, more confident, more fulfilled. So that's just a little caveat I'll probably keep plugging in just because I think it's really, really important. Um, the other part of positive psychology, as opposed to traditional psychology, is it examines the meaning and purpose of our life. So it's getting into those bigger drivers and motivators and what really helps constitute well-being. I find that it works really well with traditional psychology. So in no way is positive psychology trying to replace traditional psychology. It is a way of rounding it out. I like to think of it as both are two sides of the same coin. So each serve a purpose, and when we can combine them and what they give to us, we're already in a better place. So the overall goal of positive psychology is to expand and give a more balanced approach to the field in general so that it's serving a greater portion of our population. Those suffering with mental illness is a smaller portion compared to those of us who are not. And if you know, or if you've suffered with mental illness, you know how effective a lot of the modalities of the medical model can be. And we're going to get into some of that in a little bit. But then also, positive psychology serves to help those who are in a hard time. Just for a little application, I see this a lot in the work I do as a psychotherapist. People, have a hard time coming in. A lot of it's that stigma of, oh my gosh, if I'm having a hard time and I need professional help, what does that say about me? Well, what I love is within positive psychology as a strength-based, it's really starting to break down those barriers. I don't see it as completely done away with right now, but because of this notion of growth and of healthier living and well-being, I do find that more people are being more okay, even if they're still uncomfortable, but they're getting more comfortable with the discomfort of seeking help. So I really do think both are very relevant today. I just want to do a little check in the chat box. Is my pace going okay? Am I going too fast? Okay. All right, Ethan. Oh, good. And I'm checking our attendees. We've got some more people. I'm glad you guys can be here. All right, so I'm going to get rolling and I'll check in the chat box in just a little bit. Okay, so just a brief history. I'm a big proponent of context, so I want to just explain, just paint a picture really of the field. And I'm starting more from more present day. Prior to the 1800s, a lot was more in the field of philosophy. It's still very relevant and influences a lot of different parts of psychology, but we're going to start in the 1800s. So just a brief history. Any history buffs like me, maybe raise your hand, put a little smiley face in the chat box. So really the 1800s was the start of the medical specialty. And for about a century, this was the main focus of psychiatry and traditional psychology. It was really focused on the medical or those that the ailments that were a result of physiological or they were biological in nature. An example of this would be seizures, brain tumors, dementias, and things like that. The treatment during this time took place in asylums. So I know a lot of us, if you're like me, or kind of have this really negative, scary image. Asylums sure make for a lot of good storytelling of, horror stories and things like that. Not all were bad, but there's a reason why we associate a lot of the scary stuff with asylums. What was different during this time was that any kind of therapeutic services, they were only for those in asylums, and they were also very limited in what they could actually do. Patients were regarded in a really different way than they are today. We've seen a lot more empathy grow into our systems today, a lot more just client-centered, where in the past, and especially during this time, that wasn't the case. During this time, the treatment that did take place, they kind of dubbed them like nervous conditions. They are presumed to be an origin of disordered nerves and things like that. A big switch came from, I'm sure you guys have heard of Freud. And I know it's a controversial figure. We're not going to get into that. That's a rabbit hole I love to go in, but I'm very proud of myself. I'm going to hold myself back. Freud contributed a lot. His theories were really the first ones that brought about the idea of the unconscious and its impact on human behavior. This was a big change because it changed the way the field, and it wasn't necessarily easy for them to change because usually that's not the case, but it really changed the way they viewed mental illness. It was the first time really suggesting that not all problems have their genesis in a biological reason. His belief that mental problems could be resolved by actually talking with the patient was very, very revolutionary at the time. And it's kind of, you could call it like the, what would you call that? The word's escaping me. Maybe the beginnings. I know that's not the word I'm looking for, but it was really the beginnings of talk therapy, which we still see used a lot today. So traditional psychology, there's a lot of other people that did expand it. Like I'm saying, Freud was a big expander of just this medical model. Others were Adler, Erickson, Jungian. He's a favorite of mine. Maslow, I'm sure you're familiar or at least know of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and Carl Rogers. So these key players really brought in more of an expansion to traditional psychology. There was a lot that they added that didn't undo, but they were adding in other elements of what was causing people distress or dysfunction. So jump forward to more present day. In the 1950s and 60s, we had a really big change, which in my opinion really helped kind of turn the tide back to very traditional viewpoints of psychology, with the focus being on medicine. So the idea of, medicine is, there is a wonderful gift that is very helpful for people. I am a proponent of using what is needed and helpful and appropriate. This view, though, that medicine was going to be the cure, so there's going to be a pill for everything, it really started to create a reliance on the medical model. It started to say as if, it was all in the brain, or all you need is a pill to fix you. You saw this really aligned with the medical model. In addition, in the 1980s, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the DSM. The DSM is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So this was never meant to be used how it is today. But what it has done is it's really created, a hyper focus again on that traditional view of what is damaged, what is dysfunction in people. So it was this narrowing, along with in our insurance companies, and how that impacts people getting labeled with things like that. Again, I'm just explaining there is really good that comes from all of this. However, if that's all there is, it's only a portion of it. So you see during this time, the notion of traditional psychology got really small again and was only serving those with mental illnesses, and was also, in my opinion, providing them with only maybe more limited tools, or one tool. I believe positive psychology and growth applications are very helpful with those who have mental illnesses. So it's more than just a pill. A pill might be able to help. Different forms of medicine can certainly help people. However, there's also other skills that can help them too, and that's what we're going to get into with positive psychology. So before we get in, does anybody have any questions? If so, just type them in the chat box, and if not, I'll just move right ahead. Okay, I'm trying to follow what's going on in the chat box right now. Looks like there's been some discussion. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and move on. So positive psychology. Positive psychology is just a really good a good combo with traditional psychology. So to define it first, positive psychology is the study of human thriving and how to apply the principles to people's lives. This is a growth model. It's very meaning focused, and it's the function and overall focus is on our whole well-being. So you can see it's a really big difference than traditional psychology, where its focused is on dysfunction, where the sources of distress are, and in their opinion, that's all biological and medical. So you can see how taking both of those together, they really do complement each other, and they provide us a bigger picture, and I think a much more true picture of what is impacting individuals. So together they work as two sides of the same coin. So I'm a fan for that. Positive psychology really works at examining what gives our lives meaning and purpose. So this week, you're going to find a lot of different activities and more readings about exploring these aspects of your own life. You're going to be studying human thriving and what are the things that help you thrive. You're going to learn different growth models, and we're coming from a strength-based approach. What I love about this part is that it's applicable to everybody. It's not just for those who are suffering from mental illness. It's for anyone. So what I find in the work I do, even just here as a teacher, but then also as a psychotherapist, this is really an important thing to get through to people, is that the stress or the distress, the struggles that you're having, there's really good reasons for them. And there's ways to help lift yourself up through them. support yourself, and learn new things that can help you enrich your life. So I find that this is just a great approach or way of thinking about psychology and your own well-being, because it helps people kind of lay down their defenses. For anybody who, has the mentality or was raised with a mentality of, you can put, if you put your mind to anything, you can do it, or, your willpower can fix anything. You might find that works for a lot of the time, but most of us get to a point in our life where what was working for us is no longer. And the field of positive psychology combined with traditional psychology can really help people enter into their lives in a more intentional and purposeful way that helps to find ways to meet their current set of needs without feeling like an absolute failure. Or even if that is how they feel, they can at least buy in for a little bit and learn things and then see the benefits of the concepts we're about to learn that really do make a big impact in someone's mental functioning, their relational life, their ability to handle stress and overcome problems. So it really is a great way of enhancing the quality of life. It's also applicable for people who are fine. So if you're in a place in life where you feel like things are working, this is a way to enhance it and make it even better. But if you find your place in a state of just a lot of stress, maybe there's something going on that just happened. I know for a couple of my students, I know some of them are going through some really hard things. All of this is relevant to you too, and it can help support you in those areas. So we're going to focus on two important people in the field. I always mess up his name, so I call him Dr. C. He's a Hungarian-American psychologist, and then we have Dr. Seligman, and he's an American psychologist too. We're going to look at their contributions. Then this is going to be kind of the bulk of the material for the rest of the time. It's flow theory, and this is a great thing for helping you for helping your performance, and that can be in all the different dimensions of your life: school performance, work performance, things like that nature. And PERMA theory we're going to get into, and that's really for developing a greater sense of your whole self and whole well-being. So this is Dr. Seligman. He's an American psychologist. He was the former president of the APA, which is the American Psychological Association. Side note on him, he got the president. I don't know how you say this in this term. He was elected the president of the American Psychological Association by the greatest amount of votes ever. So people really wanted him to be in it, and I think it's because at that time specifically, people were really craving, and us, clinicians too, were craving a different way of viewing our clients, a different way of viewing humanity, instead of only looking in this biological model, but from a strength-based model. And so under his tenure, the focus became of the APA, all research and development became on mental health. And you can see mental health, mental health is, what's the word, relevant to those of us who are not suffering with mental illness, and it is still relevant to those people as well. So you're able to serve a lot more people. He describes 3 paths to happiness, and I find this really, really important. So I'm stressing this. This isn't necessarily for you, not test oriented, but just your takeaway is understanding that his view on happiness. There's 3 different paths to happiness, he says. There's your kind of movie, what it looks like in the movies, that pleasant life. I kind of think of that as that more like superficial. The second would be the good life. So you're focused in this area on personal strengths and states of flow, which we'll get into later. And then the third path to happiness is the meaningful life. And it's aimed towards that bigger purpose or that higher purpose. And what I love about this is it's really showing that, there's different levels of happiness and well-being. And if people need to stay more on the shallow end, by goodness, that's fine. However, for those of us who kind of push back against the rose-colored glasses, number 2 and number 3 are really more, I think, meaty ways, more meaningful ways, more relevant and real ways at achieving states of personal happiness or personal well-being. And I love his quote. He's trying to broaden the scope of positive psychology well beyond the smiley face. And that's really what I'm hoping that most of you take away from today. And his main contribution and what we're going to spend time in, I think the next thing we go over, is PERMA, and it's his theory of well-being. Okay. Our next person that we're going to be spending a lot of time on is Dr. C. He's a Hungarian-American psychologist, and was what really caught his attention, and this happened when he was a lot younger, was he was in Europe, and it was after World War II, and he was seeing people that were, before that he knew as a child, before the Holocaust, were very maybe strong people, confident, very successful in his community. And after the Holocaust, those that survived, he noticed two groups. Some of those same people who were so successful and appeared to have it all together were empty shells of themselves. They were destroyed. They dealt with a lot of helplessness and just were extremely dispirited and despaired, which we can all understand because of what they've gone through. However, when he noticed, what was really interesting, where there was another group of people, and they fit a different description. So these same people who went through this, very similar ordeal and trauma were able to maintain their sense of personal integrity and a sense of purpose. These differences, it gives me chills when I think about it, is really what influenced him to examine what were the sources of these people's strengths. So that's the big question that got him into the field of positive psychology. Just a note to self, and interesting, maybe extra if you ever want to get into this story, reminds me a lot of a clinician that I really enjoy. Her name is Esther Perel. She works a lot with couples and families, and she does works with a lot of immigrants as well, and she travels a lot. She's from, where is she from? I forget exactly. I don't think it was Hungary, but she was the daughter of, let me see how to say this right. Her mother and father were the sole survivors of both of their families from the Holocaust. And she described what has become, I think, her most, what would be the word? Biggest takeaway, and how she works with people is based on the observations that she got as a child as well during this time frame. She said that growing up, there were two types of families. There were those who were never able to recover. She said that they felt dead inside. And then there were those families who came back to life. And she said that her parents were vivacious and they wanted to live and make up for all of the trauma that they experienced, and others had a really hard time coming back to life. She said it was as if they were very much like Dr. C, empty shells. So with her work with people, and this is something that I find really interesting in my work with people, is that basis of, people feeling stuck or at a dead end or helpless, and helping people feel more alive, more capable. And so it's really interesting that both of these people, Dr. C and Esther Perel, she's a psychotherapist that, again, works with a lot of couples. She has some interesting books out, which I'm a big fan of. They're a little controversial, but they're out there. And she has done a lot of TED Talks, or maybe 3 TED Talks, and she has a really good podcast. So she, too, is a part of this, seeing how helping people and bringing people more alive is just such an important part of healing and also developing. So just a little side note into that. So back to Dr. C, his big contribution and the focus of your reading for this week will be on his flow theory. And that has a lot to do with your performance and is tied a lot to the qualities of play that we talked about in week 1. Let's see. I want to check the chat box. How are we doing? Let's see. Let me see, Christopher, I remember, do you or Marie believe that everyone has a mental confusion and room for improvement and no one is normal? They're just going into figuring out. That's an interesting question, Chris. For me, I believe that, let me see, mental confusion. I believe we all are impacted by all the events of our lives. And for me, in my work that governs the way I work with people individually, is I believe that we have an innate healing mechanism within ourselves. And we see this physically. Like when I cut myself, if it's just a silly paper cut, my body initiates its healing response. Or yeah, like that. If you lose a nail, like the healing response is gonna happen without me saying activate healing response. The same thing happens to us emotionally. Our cognitions, our emotions, and our body sensations are all housed in our brain. And our brain being a big part of us, which I know in Western psychology, we sometimes only think of our brain as mental exercises. It governs all of us. So all of the things that happen to us, and in this case, I'm going to talk about the traumas. So you have your big traumas, like maybe it was a divorce of your parents when you were little, to maybe something in the realm of an assault, versus the little traumas. So anything that made you feel humiliated or dismissed or unseen, all of those things get worked through the brain, and the brain processes trauma in a different way. Now, a lot of that we might be able to resolve out in a way that no longer causes us pain or produces problems. But what I see is that for my belief system and how I work with clients is we all do the best that we can, but we do have parts of our lives that are still causing us pain, and that's from the leftover effects of trauma that has not been fully processed. So for me, I find that the the normal versus unnormal is a really hard like dichotomy. I think there are times when a lot of us are in pain and when we're not in pain and we feel more peaceful. So my goal of working with people is to help them become more conscious, become more calm, become more confident. And the main focus of how I do that when I work with people is through EMDR therapy, which helps process out those big and small traumas that really have impacted everything. Um, and I can totally nerd out on this, so I think I might need to hit a break on this, but um, just for a little clarification, and that this is kind of interesting in regards to traditional and the positive psychology, is there's a couple different camps in the field. So even now, like today, there are those what's the word? I can't think of it. Those modalities in psychology that believe that people's distress or dysfunction. So we're talking about maybe those who are really anxious. That anxiety comes from those negative thoughts that they have. So for those people in that camp, they would target then and help someone improve like their thoughts. Now, other and where I'm at is I believe people's sources of distress and dysfunction, such as anxiety, come from sources of trauma in their life that haven't fully been processed. And these sources of trauma are going to create those thoughts. But I don't believe our thoughts are what creates the distress in our life. I do believe it's really helpful, and this is applicable to the concepts of PERMA, when we become more aware of our thoughts so we can help ourselves kind of ground ourselves in more reality and feel more empowered and more conscious of what is going on within our whole system, because our cognitions are a big thing. Let me see. Chris says, thank you, though. I've had many thoughts throughout my life because I was diagnosed at 11. And like you said, that was traumatic. And I have focused to be more mentally aware to better avoid bad moods. And that's a wonderful thing, Chris, that's the one thing, if I'm understanding you right, what happens a lot when people get diagnosed, even when they're diagnosed, that diagnosis can, one, be very helpful because it gives them access to treatment and help. And it can provide a lot of, what's the word? Validation. It's like, oh, okay, that's it. That's what's going on. However, if that's it, if they don't get anything else, if there's not well, guess what? Here are some things that you can do that can help you and help you become more mentally aware. That there's more than just taking a pill or working a specific program. I think that's more empowering. So I love to hear that you're really taking the time to become more mentally aware of yourself and to keep a kind of like that, I call it like a mood barometer, so you can see what your different emotional states are. So that's one of the things that I really love about PERMA, which we're going to get into here, is it helps people become more aware of their emotional states. And that can also mean mood. So if you tend to find yourself in states where there's a lot of anxiety or you're kind of down and depressed, these different concepts in PERMA that you're going to get to go over and apply this week will really help to build a more conscious self so you can become more aware of what's going on with you internally. And I'm a big proponent of that. I just also like providing that other part too that helps people get all the different avenues of help. So, okay, so thank you for sharing, Chris. Let's see. So on to PERMA. So PERMA is a theory of well-being, and this is kind of, I think of it as Dr. Seligman's little baby. Maybe we should call it a big baby. And what I love about this is it's really stating that happiness is so much more than just a fake happiness or that Pollyanna. Positive psychology research shows that when we are happy, we are productive, motivated, we're more likely to find enjoyment and then be more successful. So really in a nutshell, when we have more positive emotional states, it impacts us in every dimension of our life. So it spills over. It can enhance our relationships. It can enhance our ability to handle stress in any area of our life. It can help us perform better at work and at school. You know, focusing just though on happiness itself can often leave some of us feeling really overwhelmed and not sure where to start because happiness it's really lofty. It's like, well, what is that for you? So in order to flourish and experience a long-lasting well-being, we're going to take a look at some elements that make up well-being. I kind of think of it as, you know, it's like I don't know, that's kind of a bad example. I was thinking of, you know, it's like your skeleton. You know, your skeleton is what holds up, you know, our muscles attached to, you know, it's surrounded by our skin, our organs inside. Without our skeleton, we wouldn't be anything. So I kind of think of these concepts that we're about to get into is the backbone of what actually holds up our ability to be happy, or if you want to say calm, confident, and conscious. So the overall goal isn't just this feel good happiness and fuzzy feelings, although I'm all for feeling that way, but it's for something more than that. Okay, so PERMA is an acronym that stands for P, positive emotion. So this is a way to fight back against pessimism. In this, you're focusing on identifying and you're creating conditions where you feel those positive emotions. And positive emotions can be everything from gratitude, joy, bliss, peacefulness, contentment, appreciation, closeness with others, and the list goes on and on. So positive emotion, you might find yourself experiencing these a lot, maybe infrequent. So how you can use this part of PERMA, which is positive emotion, is really working to, Chris, what you were saying, really build your mental awareness of how you're feeling. Like, what is your mood? Well, what are the things that make you feel more peace in your life or more joy? So positive emotion, if you're wanting to cultivate those, being aware of where you are or what you're doing or who you're around when you experience those, that's then something you can go and engage in, and it will help bring out those positive emotions. The other part of this is kind of what the research is showing is, you know, how easy it is to focus on the negative. And I always like to, you can see this if we were in a physical classroom together, I could show this to you. But if I'm standing on a stool and I ask Christopher to pull me down, it would be really easy for him to do that just because of, you know, I'm up higher on the stool, he's down lower. Gravity's working with him and it's working against me. Now, if I'm on the stool and he's on the ground and I'm trying to pull Christopher up, it can be a lot harder for me to pull him up. So there is this more kind of universal tendency for all of us, for us human beings, to focus on the negative, and that negative can kind of snowball. So being able to use positive emotion, being aware of them, knowing the conditions in which you experience those, you can help push back or fight against that more negative state, or just expand it if that's a better fit. E in PERMA stands for engagement. Engagement is really about being proactive about your mental and emotional states through the activity in which you engage. And I put that social media impact on there. I'm going to come back to that. So if we'll just focus right now on engagement and activities. So if you think about the activities that you participate in, there's going to be some of them that you are completely absorbed in, where you're fully engaged, where you find yourself in those states we were just talking about, where you are joyful, where you're so focused and calm and confident. This can happen in all forms of activities. They can happen on a task, maybe even at work, or when you're working on a creative project. It can be situational. It might be project-based. So these things can happen at any time. It's also, in the things that you do for fun. So the play that you're engaged in. So when you're feeling, so a way to apply this would be if you're feeling distressed or you're just really overwhelmed and stressed out, instead of remaining in that even physical place where you are, you can use engagement in activities, knowing yourself. You can use it as a way to help pull yourself out of that. Now, granted, it might not take that stress away, but it certainly is giving you a much needed mental and emotional break from that. So really being proactive by knowing what activities, produce those times for you where you're in that more flow state. So this is also really connected to the flow theory that we're going to get into. I do want to talk about just really briefly something that I'm really passionate about, and that's engagement in social media. So I find this really relevant for everybody. Like, it's something that all of the people that I work with, this is something that comes up. This comes up even in my conversations with my girlfriends. And, my husband and I are talking a lot about this because we have kids, and my oldest is 9, and, he's begging for a phone, which I swear is not happening until he's 16, but we'll see. It's not happening yet. But what the conversations, no matter where I'm in, if I'm at work, if I'm with my students or my clients or my family, it is the role of engaging in things that just zap us. In social media, what we found out a lot, from a lot of the stuff that's been going on with Facebook, but I'm also thinking Instagram too, is how addictive these activities are. So one of the things that I really want you to challenge you with, so if you're doing the work, play, fit, push quest this week, this would make a great push goal. It's to decrease your use of social media. Now, I do believe social media is a way that makes the word smaller, that can help us feel more connected, but I do believe it tends to easily cross that threshold from helpful to unhelpful. So really watch this. Watch how the activities that you participate in maybe are on that, when I participate in these, I feel really good about myself. And then, man, if I participate in this, especially social media, and I'm scrolling through my feed and I find myself feeling really inadequate, or, man, like, how do they have all that and I don't? Or, goodness, man, I just, when you find yourself really critical, use that as that mental awareness to say, that's enough. So really watch out for that. I think social media is something, in technology, is something that, our culture today is really struggling with. So I'm just putting that out there. And I want to check in with you guys in the chat box. What's it like for you? In regards to social media, do you feel like you have a handle on it and how much you use it? Do you find that it's something that adds to you, or is it something that's taking away? Chris says, I hear you. It can be too negative when you're on there too long. It's nothing for you. What about other people? Greg says, I have a handle on it. I feel like that's great, Greg. Anybody else? So Ethan, you have it both positive and negative. Dion says, I find social media to be toxic most of the time. Christopher, you more of that direct, you call family and friends to talk to. Okay, gotcha. Let's see, Danielle says, I think, or Daniel, I'm sorry. I think that it's both up and down, totally. And I left it. I feel like that's better for me. You know, that's interesting. I did a social media cleanse about a year ago, and I was off for 3 months, and it was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. Coming back to it, I had noticed I didn't like my habits. My habits were more, yes, a cleanse, social media cleanse. So just so you know, if you're engaged in social media a lot and you find that it's negatively impacting how you feel about yourself or other people, you know, throw that into your push goal this week of I'm going to stay off. I'll do like a mini cleanse for the week, or significantly cut down your time. Let's see, Dion says, I only use social media to talk to my friends that moved away. Yeah, and so it's a great, that's the hard thing I think about it, is because it is so useful to do positive things. However, it can be so tricky. I know for me, I'm laughing because I'm like, I'm experiencing one of these states of flow where I lose track of time, but it's more in a negative way. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I've spent way too much time on social media instead of, you know, something else. So that's just something that's really important to me, because I find that with a lot of the people I work with, there's almost it's more than a habit. It's forming an addiction, and so this is a way to really help make sure that you're engaging in activities that are truly good for you. Let's see, Mark says, I'm actually trying to get on social media more because of the business opportunities there. Yeah, Mark, that's a great one. And so I don't know if you've thought about using the Work Play Fit push to do your quest. It could be really helpful for you, since you're, you know, to do that, to get on social media for those business opportunities, and also do it within a healthy range. So you can think of maybe even using time batching, which we talked about in week 1, about how to use those of ways of kind of doing, what's the word? Just keeping a check on how much you're on there. Okay. All right. So that's just that's another rabbit hole I can get in there. Let me see. Dion says social media is going to be a big part of my future, and you're conflicted about it. And that's where I say that it is possible, Dion, to have a very healthy relationship with social media. However, it takes intention. It takes awareness of knowing yourself, and it takes a strategic plan. So having those goals. So maybe for you, you want to think about using Work, Play, Fit, Push as a way to, you know, in time batching, as this is when I'm going to be using it, this is how long I'm going to be, and things like that. So there are ways to use it just for the healthy benefits, but just making sure in the engagement, you know, that you're engaging so where it's not past I think of it like the point of no return. But you can always return because you can always shut down your phone. Okay, so let's see, Mark says, that's exactly what I'm doing. It's easy to get sucked in, but like you said, it takes awareness, and you might need to set alarms. Definitely, you can. And there's some really cool new apps that help you do that, no matter if you're an Android user. I know I have an iPhone, so on iOS, they have, you know, new time management, like those built into the phone. So I use those. So that's really helpful. So there's tools coming out, so we can see that this is very relevant to our culture, is, are we engaging in things that are good for our mental and emotional states? So really being aware of those things. Okay, that's my little platform. All right. Okay, next one. It's R. So the R in PERMA stands for relationships. We human beings, we are not an island. We are wired for relationship. We are wired for community. This is one of those other ones I think that we have, a lot of us are in our world today, even though we are able to be connected through, you know, the internet and different social media platforms, we still feel really isolated. So if you're in a place in your life and you're feeling really stressed, it's always really important to check in on, are you getting those positive and meaningful interactions with the people in your life? So how are your relationships doing? Is this something that you're thriving in right now and you feel really close? Is it something where you're feeling really lonely, or you have a lot of anxiety about. We know how important people are, how powerful and influential they are to our mental and emotional states. This can be a really hard one when someone's going through a breakup, um, or when you've made a move and all of a sudden you find yourself in a new city and you're like, "Well, how do I make friends?" And I swear it's so odd. The older we get, the harder it can be. I was at the playground the other day, and my 3-year-old, he's like, so excited. He's like, "Mom." He looks at this playground. We don't know a soul out there, and he's like, "Look at all my friends. I'm gonna go make friends." And so for children, it seems really just easy to. So if you find throughout the week as you're doing different the activities and in the material as you're thinking about these, like I like to think of PERMA as also like slices of your life, so areas or dimensions of your life. You can kind of do like a what's the word? Take your temperature in these areas. So if you find your relationship life is really good, you got a good healthy temperature, you're you're solid on that one. But if you find that, man, you need something more, think about joining different community groups. If at Full Sail, if you're here close by, you can find some really good people to connect with, just really finding opportunities. I know, just on a personal note, for me, after college, a lot of my friends moved away, and it was strange because I was in the same place that I loved and everything was really enjoyable, but then all of a sudden my friends are gone. So for myself, I joined a kickball league and just made some really good friends. For me, there's a lot we can unpack there with play history and play personalities and stuff like that. But if relationships is something where you feel like you're lacking, really think about your work from week one, the stuff that brought you joy, those things you love to do, and you can identify places to go connect with those people. I know like book clubs are making a big comeback. I don't know if they ever really needed to come, I don't know if they stopped, but that seems to be something where people are finding a lot of connections with others too. So no matter what you love, you can always find a group of people. And sometimes that can be hard, but you also have options. Okay, so meaning. PERMA, M is meaning. It's really about connecting to something bigger. This can also be connected to community service, so feeling like you're giving back to other people. And it can also relate to the need for a spiritual dimension or a higher purpose of your life. So if you're looking at PERMA again as like the different slices of your life or different areas of your life, if you feel like you have a strong sense of meaning, you're going to find yourself experiencing, a stronger sense of well-being. You're going to feel connected. Just a note to self too, it's not like all of these have to be 100% all the time. That's just not possible. I mean, maybe there's that rare part of your life where everything's working out and you feel great in all of these areas. But let's say, for example, you have a lot of meaning in your life. Maybe that comes from your personal beliefs, your faith, or an organization you're involved in that has a lot to do with serving more to that higher purpose. But let's say you're really lacking in, really individual, strong personal friendships. Well, this one, you might know, hey, it makes sense. I want to work on my relationships, but you know what? I do have a lot of meaning. So you can see how when you can use this as a way to keep a temperature read on your whole self and work to improve, or just understand, during this time in my life, this area, it's going to be lacking. And that's going to impact me, but I do have these other areas. So that's just another way of utilizing this too. So the last one is achievement. And achievement is really about your growth potential. Now, it's not, a lot of people go immediately to, business success, which it definitely can be, but it's really just about striving to better yourself. That can be through being goal-oriented, mastering a certain skill, accomplishing a task that you're setting out to. So it could really be anything. So on a whole, PERMA really is hitting those main areas of our life that contribute to a sense of happiness, awareness, confidence, peacefulness, and just a greater inner state of well-being. So with those, does anybody have any questions? If so, you can type them in the chat box. Oh, naps. I'm seeing something about naps. I definitely enjoy naps. Yes, yes. So the engaging in rest too. I'm so glad you said that. It's very important. Remembering that all of it's about balance. And so knowing that finding time for rest is huge. Agreed. Let me share any story to motivate others. Let me see. Daniel, can you clarify your question? Can that be sharing a story? Was that about achievement? Because it definitely can be. And there was actually something I was going to share with y'all about that very thing. See, Daniel, were you talking about achievement with that? Okay. The VA wants me to share rehab story. Oh my gosh, wow. How do you feel about that? Is that something that you're wanting to do, or are you on the fence? Just so those who aren't in the chat box and you're watching it, Daniel's been asked by the VA to share a story of rehabilitation. Oh, you're going to do it. Oh my gosh. I'm so happy for you. Will you do me a favor and share that with me when you are done? That one means so much to me. That can be, thank you, Daniel. I'm so excited for you. So you just inspired me to share something with you all. Okay, I want to do this without let's see. I'm going to hit pause on showing my screen, and I'm going to bring up something for you all. It's funny. It's on Instagram. We were just talking about social media, but this is the positive sides of it. Let's see. His name is Brad. Oh, no, it's not available. Hold on. I'm going to find this for y'all. Daniel, that's awesome. I'm so excited for you. Let's see. Where are saved? Thank you for holding on for me. Okay, I found it. All right, so I'm going to show you all this. Let me go back to share my screen. Okay, can you guys see my screen? If you do, type yes in the chat box. You should be able to see it again. Okay, cool. Daniel, I am so excited for you. And this is something that I find really relevant to today. As I'm sure Daniel can share a lot from his too. So this is, I think, the benefits of social media and engagement and sharing your story. The stories that are inspirational in our life are usually some of our hardest moments, and it's usually after we've been able to glean, if it's healing, if it's wisdom, and growth and improvement in that area. On the same achievement screen, thought it was something new. Okay, so right now you should be seeing this Instagram page for Brad Smeal. Are you? If you would type yes or no, because I want to make sure you're seeing it. So can you type yes? Okay, cool. So Brad is a huge inspiration for me. And Daniel, I hope this is just kind of like warming you up to do what you're about to do, because it is so helpful when we are in a position where things are not working out, and especially when we feel like we're the only ones and we feel so isolated or alone, like no one else has a clue. When we find a part of our story in someone else's. I shared last week that, the last 4 years of my life I've had a lot of hard stuff. I fell while I was rock climbing, and I broke my back, banged up some other really important parts of my spine, and tore apart my SI joint. I wasn't able to walk. It's been a really long road to recovery. And there were times in it where it just felt all the things that it would feel like that. I didn't feel like myself. I lost all of the things that felt like who I was. I've always been very active and sports oriented. And for a long time, I wasn't able, and I wasn't sure if I ever was. And I came across on social media Brad, and he's a pro wakeboarder who was injured 5 years ago doing one of his big moves. So I'm going to show this story right here, and I hope you find it to be inspiring. I hope it's going to show well on here, and if it doesn't, I'll just send you the link, and I'll actually put this in the chat box right now so you can have it. But this guy is a huge inspiration to me when I was bedbound and not able to walk, trying to learn to walk again. And it was so hard. He was such an inspiration to me. So Daniel, I know you're going to be an inspiration to the other veterans that you're going to be sharing your story with. So I'm a big proponent of, giving back. When we get back to each other, we lift each other up, and it lifts us up in return. So just because of time, I just see that. I'm not going to show the video, but this is something you can watch on your own. Let's see, Daniel says, mine is going to be on getting help to get off painkillers with medication-assisted treatment in hopes that others can see it's possible as a part of a national overdose awareness day at the end of the month. I have been off them for almost a year. Daniel, that's wonderful. Man, I've got chills. If you could see my arms, you would see all the chills. That's amazing. And talk about so helpful for so many people, veterans and others. I'm so thankful that that's something that you're going to be sharing and that you've been able to accomplish yourself. That's just huge. Note to self, I will say this is something that it reminds me what can be so hard when you're getting treated, if that's for something mentally going on, physically going on, and the combination of those. Some of those things that can help us better can also provide us with new opportunities for trouble. People who are in pain need help with that, and medication is a very helpful way. I know for myself, during some of my the last 4 years, pain medication was a way that something I needed. And so being able, just to hear someone else who was on pain medication and was able, through your journey to have the goal of getting off and being healthy with that's just wonderful. So I always find that, especially in our pop culture, things can go the pendulum, So there are people who really do need things like painkillers, and there are people who really do need assistance with mental illness, and getting that treatment is so helpful. But remembering that we're more than just that one dysfunction or that one trouble, and getting all access and ways of healing as much as we possibly can. That's something that requires sometimes more than just medication, and requires help getting off the medication. So that's why I find this work just so relevant, because it's really looking at the whole and not just that problem area of your life. And Daniel, I'm just so proud of you. I love it. So today, sometime when you need a little kind of pep talk, check this guy out. He's an inspiration to me. He was a source where I could borrow hope from him for a while when I was in a really kind of down place. So this one is a 12-year-old letter to himself. It's really powerful. So watch that when you can. Okay, so back to the trainings. We're almost done. Let's see. Let me see. So think about it for yourself. What areas in your life are you feeling, that this could be applicable to? So is it, school? Do you find that this could be helpful relationally, in your community life, in your spiritual life? Where do you think that this could be helpful for you? Maybe even work, helping you deal with stress. And if you could type that, what you're thinking about, in the chat box. I know a lot of students find PERMA to be really helpful to help them combat the stress that happens in their academic life, because here at Full Sail, you know how stressful it can be when you've got, Chris, mental health would definitely help in that area. Greg, work, totally. So utilizing these things to help you combat stress wherever you find it, if it's at work, in your work life, your school life, your mental health life, your physical self, your relationships. This is all here to help you apply it in all the areas that it's needed, and then it can also enhance all the things that are going well too. Let's see, Ethan says, Perma will help me with my relationships. I have a very secluded life. Ethan, that's wonderful that you already have that insight and you can connect to see where that can help you, move more from isolation to community, or closeness, and being able to find avenues to do that help you do that in a healthy way. That's one of the things I got to say I love about social media. Some of the clients that I work with have a lot of social anxiety. So hearing the word closeness and community and relationships sends some of them into full out panic mode. So, the social media can be a really good, I call it like a in between, a safe move where you can start to form relationships with people, but maybe not feel overly exposed if, more out in the open. But the goal is, always to build those personal relationships. So Ethan, I love hearing that that's something that you think can really help you. Okay, so we're going to move on to flow theory. Flow theory, and this will probably, just doing a time check, I'm thinking a couple minutes, or not a couple minutes, like 5-10 minutes. Okay. All right. So flow theory is by Dr. C. And I really wish I could say his name, but I butcher it every single time. He's talking about flow states, and flow states is really that idea you've probably experienced before when you're just in the zone. You can also think of it, there's research in the past, in the earlier 1900s, in regarding this as altered states in consciousness. So a flow state is a state in which people are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. The experiences is so immersing or enjoyable that you'll just continue to do it, even at a great cost. And that cost might be it's really hard or stressful, yet you're still just so in it, so in the zone, you keep working on it just for the sake of doing it. So I'm sure you can notice how these are really connected to qualities of play. So like diminished consciousness of self or loss of time. Those are elements that are really experienced a lot in the flow state. So you've probably experienced this, when you're working on something that you love that's involved with your creativity. I know a lot of my students who are doing different forms of modeling find that they get in flow states very often. And also to note that it's not something you necessarily will always get in at different times. I know for me, there's times when I'm playing the piano where I am so in it, and then there's others where I'm like not in it. And then the same goes with, I practice martial arts, and there's times when I experience states of flow when I'm doing my different forms. And yet, if I'm overly critical of myself and really in my head, it's hard to get in that flow state. So one of the reasons to recognize your ability to get in flow, or if you are or if you're not, is to know that it really does increase your productivity and enhances your performance. You can see this also in your athletic life, or with amateur and professional athletes. The word escaped me there, just how helpful it can be, because it really does get you in this hyper-focused zone, and you're more on autopilot, so things are coming together and you're not experiencing doubt or things along that nature. A lot of our Full Sail students tend to really, they're like, oh yeah, I get flow, because you're usually, for the most part, really attached to that creative side of yourself. So you might experience in the art that you do, in the different projects that you're working on and things like that. So one of the things it also helps with is it helps with overcoming creative blocks. So I'm sure some of you might have experienced before, like if you're in, let's say you're working on a character or a storyline and you're finding there's just some holes, and you don't know how to move forward. When you're in a flow state, it can really help get over those creative blocks, and it helps your focusing and your ability to problem solve. So those are some other really, added bonuses of getting in a state of flow. Getting in a state of flow, it's something that happens while you're performing an activity where you're all in. And you'll find that these activities, they're not going to be like your completely passive state. So it's going to be an activity where you're experiencing some level of stress. Now, stress at some point gets unhealthy, but some stress, like if it's too much stress, you can go into like the, freeze mode, fight mode, or flight mode. So there is a point when stress gets too much and it becomes bad stress or unhealthy stress. But in the states of flow, you do need a level of stress where it's providing you stimulation, like you feel mentally, even maybe, just mentally stimulated. You're working on something that's a challenge. So those activities that have that good, good activating stress, those are going to be times where you find flow is much more likely to occur. So the activities where it's more passive, like there's not a lot of effort mentally, emotionally, or physically, they tend to not have that. So that would be like taking a bath, relaxing in the tub. I'm not going to experience flow. I'm going to experience relaxation, but not flow. Okay. So here's some things that you can do. And again, like the reason for doing this would be to really help you complete a task, really tap into your best self when you're in the zone and overcome any of, those creative blocks or the specific stressors of that project. So they go into this in the reading. So there's things that you can do to help cultivate that state of flow. So just kind of wrapping up, when it comes to positive psychology and the things that you'll learn this week, this kind of ties back to my little pet peeve about the more Pollyanna version of it, are the 3 maxims. So Christopher Peterson is another pioneering researcher in the field, and he's come up with these 3 maxims, the 3 maxims of positive psychology to really help get into the core of it, I think. It's number 1 is what is good in life is as genuine as what is bad. So it's finding that there is genuine in both. There's not either or. Number 2, really important. What is good in life is not simply the absence of what is problematic. So this is a really important one because a lot of us sometimes we just want, and there's nothing wrong with this, we want our problems to disappear. Well, it's to know that we can still create positivity. Positivity can mean health. It can mean happiness. Oh, sorry, it's my dog. Milky. I'm at home again today doing this one. So it could be quiet, not in the office. So that worked out really well, didn't it? So back to this one, number 2 is really important. What is good in life is not simply the absence of what is problematic. We're going to have problems in our life. It's absolutely normal to not want them. But when we have them, we don't have to associate that with everything's bad. Number 3, the good life requires its own explanation, not just a simple theory of disorder. This really hits the nail on the head about the difference between just your medical version that you see a lot at the disease model of traditional psychology and this growth-oriented mindset in positive psychology. Sorry, Milky, come here. I am so sorry, y'all. Milky, wait, quiet. Okay, he did it last time, so he did it this time too. Let me see. Okay, so I think that's about it. So just remember that your well-being, you're going to get into the parts of it, and it's all the parts that contribute to the whole sense of well-being. There's going to be times where you got all of them aligned. That might be rather rare, but enjoy it if it's there for you. But if you find that those parts of your life that are more stressful or you'd like to improve, I really think you'll find this week to be really helpful in helping you make and cultivate your own positive change through a lot of PERMA, or the concept of PERMA. I always think of perm when I say that, so I have like this like 80s themed, like my like 5-year-old self when I wanted to look like Polly, or not Pollyanna, what's her name? Curly Sue. And I talked my mom into letting me get a perm. It was horrible. That's always what I think of when I say PERMA. And it does cultivate a positive emotion. Let me see. Oh, and just remember, y'all, we're multifaceted. We have a lot of dimensions to ourselves that impact our overall human functioning. And there are parts of us biologically, there's some of us that we have a greater propensity to depression or mood states that are more varying in the negative end. So our biology counts and it matters. Our personal life, our personal relationships, our community relationships, the more institutional places that we might be a part of, our cultural upbringing and our current connections to that, and then just us being citizens of the world, like from a global dimension. So there's just so much that is impacted, and that does make an impact on our own sense of well-being. So it's really to think bigger. So you are thinking about your individual life, but there's a lot that makes you you. There's a lot that impacts and affects you. So sometimes it can be really helpful, especially when you're just starting out, here at Full Sail. It's just so fast paced. It can kind of be a little overwhelming. So, just remember, if you're feeling stressed, there's reasons for it. And utilizing this viewpoint can help you get that bird's eye view so you can see the forest through the trees. Okay. Well, everybody, thank you so much. Let me see. Mark says that he thinks about perms too, so I'm not the only one. Okay. Well, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. If anybody has any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box. And I wish you all the very best. Don't forget, tonight you have your 2.2 call to play due. Remember, it is not a test. And then, let me see, Thursday you have your initial discussion post, and then Sunday you have your response posts. Did I say that right? And they need to be to 2 people, okay? If you have any other questions, feel free to email your specific instructor. No problem. Thanks, Ethan. I really appreciate y'all for being here. And I will have this posted, if not today, tomorrow, so you can watch the recording if you need to. Thanks, Christopher. I'm not even going to attempt to say that. I like your sense of humor. Oh, and Daniel, I'm so looking forward to read more about what you're doing with the VA and your own story. Oh, and don't forget to check out Brad. He's a huge inspiration to me. So use your social media wisely. Okay, bye everybody.